This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so yesterday in the demo session, we have discussed about few points, uh, especially what is performance testing, why performance testing, what are the different tools available in the market, what LoadRunner architecture. We have also seen a sample recording and replay of the script. We have also discussed about the course content, and then we address few question and answers. So what was the generic definition that we discussed yesterday? Is It's performance testing is all about checking the performance of an application. I mean, if you want to understand in software terms, like checking the performance of a software application, okay, by applying some expected load. What is load here? Load is nothing but number of users. With how many number of users you have to test the application. So load in general means number of users here. Okay. Now, in today's session, uh, in today's session, we are going to discuss about types of performance testing. Okay. So why we have why there are multiple types of performance testing, and what uh, each of the performance testing types of performance testing means. So we'll discuss that. I do have slides for each and everything. But I would like to explain and write some running notes in today's session in the same notepad, so that we can understand and we can share the notepad as well. Okay, the running notes as well. So performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, so I will be using these terms, in today's session again. But generally, performance testing is always measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. I'll tell you what is speed, what is stability, and scalability when we relate these terms with the types of performance testing. So, types of performance testing. What are the different types of performance testing? So, the first thing is smoke test. I mean, actually, it is not a major type of test. Okay, it is not a major type of test. Um, but I'll explain you that. And then you have load test, which is the first major type of performance testing. Okay, and then you have um, stress testing. Then you have endurance testing, when you can also call it as soak test, or you can also call it as duration test. Okay, and then you have scalability test. You can also have volume testing. Then you have failover testing. Okay, then you can also add a couple of points on spike testing. Okay, so these are the different types of performance testing. I mean, we will begin with smoke test. So what is, I mean, it is not at all a major type of performance testing, first of all. I mean, you can remove it and keep it outside also. I mean, you can exclude from types of performance testing. Okay, let me do that, and I can explain you separately. Okay, but why we have to do smoke test first? I mean, even before you run any of these type of tests like load test, stress test, endurance test on, you have to run a smoke test. It is quite a common term that we use in manual testing as well. But again, for with respect to performance testing, where is this smoke test coming from? So once you develop scripts, okay, once you develop scripts, you upload it into controller. That's what we discussed yesterday, right? And then you trigger the execution from controller. Okay, so before uploading or before running the load test or stress test or whatever it is, you actually run a small smoke test. I mean, smoke test in sense like we run it for 5 to 10 minutes with very limited number of users, like 2 users or 3 users, something like that, for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Why? to make sure that the our scripts are working end to end, first of all, and then also to make sure that the application is up and running properly. Okay, on all in all, the smoke test will let us know whether we have to proceed and go ahead and run the load test or not. You got my point? So whatever the major type of test we run, okay, before that always run a smoke test. Smoke test will give an assurance that our scripts are working fine and the application is also up and running. Then you can definitely go ahead and run the load test and other types of tests, whatever you plan to. Now, what is load test here? Is the first major type of test that we do. So as part of this load test, we actually check the speed of the application. What do you mean by checking the speed of the application? So speed in sense, how fast the application is responding, how fast the pages are loading, how fast the user is able to navigate from one page to another page. Like you click a link, okay, and you see how much time it is taking to navigate from one page to another page. Okay, so it's all about speed. I mean, how fast the application is responding. Checking the speed of the application by applying, okay, expected load. Load means number of users. Okay, load means uh, number of users. Let's say 500 users for today's example. Now, who is going to give this number to us? Who is going to tell us, hey, run a load test with 500 users or run a load test with 300 users, like that? Who is going to tell or give this number to us? It's always the product owner, or the client, or you can say the owner of the product. Okay, they are going to tell us with how many users we have to run the load test. How they will come to know, how they know like we have to run with 500 users, it's a different concept. We'll discuss in the next session. But generally 500 users is the input, or the load input, or the load volumes mostly given by the client. Okay, given by client, or let's say product owner, or you can say business team, whatever it is. In different team, in different projects, they call it differently. Now, what is that you are going to validate, and for how long you are going to run this load test? Load test is always run for 1 hour. Okay, it will be a 1 hour load test. So that means you can run a steady state load test from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. There is some concept called ramp up and ramp down, which we will discuss later, but not required now. For now, just understand that load test will run for 1 hour. Now, in that 1 hour of load test, okay, what are you going to verify? You are going to verify mainly the response times. First thing is you are going to verify the response times. What is response times? Amount of time taken for a request to go to server and get the response back, right? So yesterday we discussed when we replayed the script of launch, login, and logout, we have seen some response time. That is response time. Okay, response time means the amount of time taken for a request to go to server and then come back with the response. Okay, so that is response time. Ideally, as per industry standard, response time should not be greater than 2 seconds. Okay, as per industry standard, response time should not be greater than 2 seconds. They call it as SLA. SLA means service level agreement. What is this service level agreement? It is an agreement between the product owner or the client with the application team, saying that, hey, you are going to develop my application, right? Make sure that the application, whatever the buttons or whatever the user actions they perform, the response time should not be greater than 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Like that, the client will give some number. That is a that will be a agreement, SLA, service level agreement. The service level agreement can be something like the response time should not be greater than 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 5 seconds, like that. Okay, so We verify response times, okay, and uh, we also verify server issues, like how the servers are performing. So to understand in detail, tomorrow, I mean in the next session, we are going to discuss about servers also. What is a server? What is application server? What is database server? What is web server? Because performance testing is all about handling with servers only. Okay, you might have seen like when you go to ATMs or when you access some websites, they say server down, server down. So that server. So because of performance issue only, the server will be down most of the time. Okay. So we also verify some server issues. Okay. So load test is all about checking the speed of the application by applying some load or expected load. Load means number of users. Okay. Now, who will give the number? Client or product owner or business team will give this number. We have to run the load test for 1 hour. After running the load test for 1 hour, you have to verify the response times. For which transaction you got a response time greater than SLA, those response times you have to report it to the application team or the development team. Okay. So this is about load test at a very high level. We will see all these things practically. Okay. In our upcoming sessions. But for now, I want you to understand the different types of performance testing we have. First one is the load test. This is the first major test that we do, guys. This is the first major test. Okay. Now, if this load test is successful, if this load test is successful, then only we will go ahead and run any other type of test. Like if load test is a failure, right? You cannot run any of these actually. I mean, there is no point in executing all of these. First major test is load test. If that itself is failing, there is no point in running anything else. So if you want to run any other type of test, the prerequisite is your load test should be successful. Okay. Stress testing means, as the name suggests, simply applying more load on the system than the applying more load than the system and the load test. I mean load test volumes. So what do you mean by this? Applying more load on the system than the load test volume system, or you can say application, whatever it is. So that means if you run the load test with 500 users, anything above 500 can be a kind of stress testing only. That means you run a test with 600 users, you run a test with 700 users. That means you are trying to stress the system with more number of users than the load test. Simple. Okay? So that means uh, you are applying more load. For example, if load test is run is executed with 500 users, then stress testing can be executed, let's say with 600, 700, 800, okay? Or you can also run until it breaks. It breaks or it crashes or whatever it is. You can take till, you can run until that point also. Okay. Now, how long we will run it? Basically, we can run it with run for 1 hour. What do you verify? Again, we verify response times. And at the same time, we also verify, because we are applying more load on the system, we are applying more load on the system, how the system is responding, how the application is responding. Okay. So it's all about checking how the application is responding when there is more load than the actual load. For example, if I let's take an example of a restaurant. So let's say there is a restaurant and there are 5 tables and there is one helper, okay, who is assisting the customers on those 5 tables, like assisting in sense they are the helper is taking the food order and delivering the food. Now, because of demand, the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 5 to 7. Okay, now what the helper is doing, instead of 5, the helper is taking the food orders from 7 tables and then delivering the food. Now again there is more demand for the restaurant. Then the owner decided to increase the number of tables from 7 to 9. Then the helper, the helper is still able to take the food order from the customers, but the helper is delivering the food little bit late. Like, earlier if the helper used to deliver the food in 20 minutes, now he is taking, let's say, 35-40 minutes. Okay, now still the demand increases, and the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 9 to 11. Then the helper at that point of time said, it's enough. I'm not gonna serve anyone because I cannot handle the load. And then he quits. He moved out of the restaurant. That means there was more load applied, okay, than expected, than normal load. And then at some point of time, it broke. Right? The helper couldn't do anything. He just quit and he went out, he moved out of that restaurant. That's the breaking point. Okay. So similarly here also, stress testing means applying more stress than the load test, than the users that you have used in the load testing, in simple terms. Okay, it can go ahead and run until it can break also. They say that, can you identify the breaking point? Yes, we can identify the breaking point. How? You keep on increasing the users and tell them where it exactly breaks. You can do that. I mean, there is no hard rule that, you cannot run till that point. You can run, always run. Okay. And then response time should be again should be the first criteria. And then we also verify the server issues, how the servers are responding. There are some server side metrics that we also verify, which we will discuss in detail. Because this is just a demo session, I'm just giving you a very high level understanding of different types of tests. Okay, any questions so far? Did you understand what is load test and what is stress testing? How and where we configure this? In controller. In controller, we create or configure these type of scenarios and then run the test and then trigger the test. Okay. So it's script develop. It is, these tests are nowhere related to script development. Script development is a different activity which we do in Vusion. Once the scripts are developed and once we upload in Vue controller, you can create whatever the type of test you want and then run depending on your requirement. I'll wait for 1 minute. If you have any questions, you can ask, and then I'll move to next endurance testing. Okay. So I do have slides, guys, for this. Don't worry, I'll share the slides. But I just want to write something on the notepad so that you can understand like what exactly we are discussing. Okay. So basically, performance testing definition is this. Load means this. Performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So speed is directly related to load test. Speed is directly related to load test. Okay. So now let me go to next type of testing, that is endurance or soak or duration test. What is this test? Endurance test means checking the stability of the application. How stable is the application when we run for longer duration? When we run the test for longer duration. That means, like, normally load test will run for 1 hour, right? Endurance test will be run for 3 hours, in, in some projects 5 hours, in some projects 8 hours, in some projects 1 day, in some projects 2 days, like that. Okay, most of the times endurance test will be run for 5 hours, 8 hours, like that. Hours, 5 hours, 8 hours. Days, rarely. Now, why we have to run this? Why we have to run the test for this much duration? To check the stability. How stable is the application if we are running the test for longer duration? Okay. Now, what exactly we are going to verify? Of course, response times. Now, the response time should be similar or stable throughout the test. Let's say in the first 1 hour, let's say I'm running the test for 5 hours. In the first 1 hour, if you are getting a response time like 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, something like that, it should be stable throughout the test. Now in the first 1 hour, you are getting a response time of 2.5 seconds on an average. Now in the second hour, you are getting 3 seconds. In the third hour, you are getting 5 seconds. In the fourth hour, you are getting 6 seconds. In the seventh hour, you are getting 8 seconds. No. That means your application is not stable enough to run for longer duration. That means there is some issue. Your application is not stable at all. So along with response times, okay, you have to verify the response times hour by hour. Okay, first hour how it is responding, second hour how it is responding, third hour how the application is responding, where did it fail anywhere, are you getting slow response times anywhere in the 5 hours duration, you have to analyze. Okay, that is the meaning of endurance test or soak test or duration test. Now along with response times, you also verify something called memory leaks. So what is memory leaks, I'll explain you later, it's a different concept altogether. But there is something called memory leak which we can identify mostly in the endurance test. That doesn't mean that this issue will not come up in the other types of tests, but this issue is mostly occurred in endurance test when we run for longer duration. Okay, that is memory leaks. Now one more question is, what is the load that you are going to apply for this type of test? Generally in some projects they apply same load as load test. That means same users as load test. Okay, in some other projects they apply 75% of the load. Okay, uh, from load test. So whatever the load test volumes or users we have used, from that they take 75%. Some of the projects they take 100%. Same in sense, 100% load. You can simply say 100%. So what should you do if you are already if you're working, if you started working in a project which is already following some approach, then continue to use the same approach. Like if they follow 100%, you also follow 100%. If they follow 75%, you also follow 75%. But if you are the one who has to take a decision, then better go with this first one. Apply 100%. That means if in low test, if you are running the test with 500 users, same thing you use for endurance test also. Got my point? Any questions? Did everyone understand what is this endurance test? Why we have to run for longer duration? To verify response times, to verify the stability for every hour, okay, and also to verify some memory leaks. Any questions? So again, these tests, if you want to run, first of all, load test should be successful. Understand understand the dependency. Here I'm saying apply more load on the application than the load test. That means if load test itself is a failure, how can you apply more load here? That means this test is invalid. If even you cannot run this. Similarly here also, if the load test itself is failing for 1 hour, how can it pass for 5 hours or 8 hours? Got my point? So that's the reason load test should be successful before you run a stress testing or endurance type of testing. Okay? Any questions? I'll just give a pause here. Any questions?
So, so in all that test, that will be load test has to be completed first. We need to verify load test needs to be
Yes.
completed.
In every
In all,
project, it need not
no,
be
in all these
one.
aspects, in all these different types of testing, load test needs to be completed first.
Yes, yes. That's what I'm
That
saying.
is the
I-
that is the mandatory thing, first one, right?
yes. Irrespective of the company you work, irrespective of the client you work, irrespective of the location you work, the first type of major test that you run is load test only. If that
Okay.
is
So
successful,
in case
then
of
only you go
endurance
for other
testing,
tests.
where we are running for longer duration of time, right? So that time the load remains the same, which is as same as the load test that we have executed.
Yes, in some projects they will take only 75%. For example, Some projects will take as it is 500 users. Like when you compare with current today's example, in today's example in load test we run 500 users. In some projects they use 500. In some projects they use 75%. That is 375 users.
Okay. Okay. 75% is 500 users. Okay.
Yeah. 75%
And
of 500 is
like how
375, right?
we need to let's say I am the owner of this particular application and I'm doing a performance test. How to decide which one to go? Is there any factors that we need to consider?
That's what I'm telling. If you are the owner, if you have to test, you have to use this. Okay. See, I mean, from my personal opinion, why am I
Yeah.
telling this is, why am I telling this option is, see, when you are running a 100% load test here for 1 hour, that means the client has decided or client knows that this is the actual target or actual user volumes. Now, why should I reduce here when I'm running for 2 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours? The load should remain same. That is my personal opinion. And I
Exactly. Correct.
where whichever project I work, I always take this only.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Now I understand.
Okay.
Yeah. We need to go with the load only by increasing the number of hours with respect to duration, whether two
Yes.
hours or 3 hours. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next one is scalability. I mean, the term stability I have used here. If you see the term stability, I have related it for endurance testing. Okay. Now the next one is scalability. The name suggests, okay, the name itself is suggesting it is scalability. It means like checking the scalability of the application by considering, let's say, by considering some future growth. See, what happens is the client will tell you that, hey, now the load test has to run with 500 users. That's fine. Now, in the next 6 months or 1 year, my application users might grow by 50%. If that is what the client is saying to you, now he's saying that in future, okay, in next 6 months, the users might increase by 50%. If they say like that, then now itself you have to run a kind of scalability test with more number of users. That means you have to increase the number of users by 50%. Okay. Now recently I'll tell you one example. And this is a kind of application. Oh, sorry, this is a kind of test where you might get some ad hoc requests also. For example, recently, I'll tell you one thing happened. We all know pandemic, right? The COVID pandemic, disturbed everyone. So what happened? I was working for one of the bank. I was supporting for one of the bank in US. So the client called us, and the client said that I think it was exactly in the month of August, July or August 2020, I guess. So the client called us and said that, hey, uh, due to COVID or due to pandemic, the banking users are not physically going to bank or directly going to bank. Rather, they are trying to use online applications. Now, considering that, okay, the number of due to COVID, the number of users accessing the banking application increased drastically. Now, what did the client tell us is, in the next 3 months, the number of users will definitely increase to by 400%. Okay, or 300%. The number exactly they have said is like it can go up to 400%. Exact thing what they conveyed is the users can go up to 400%. So now what they informed us is, can you guys test the application with 400% load and tell us whether the applications are supporting or not. It's not about one application, guys. It's about multiple applications, whether all the applications, the critical applications, whether they are supporting 400% load or not, is what we have to tell, confirm them. Now what should you do? Can you tell what you have to do now, if that is your requirement? So your client is saying, your client is saying, test my application and tell me whether it is supporting 400% load or not. So what should you do? Any guess?
So need to increase the number of users by 400% with the current existing load.
Let's say 100% load. 100% load test what we run is with 500 users. Now you tell me what should I do?
20, so 20, 2000 users.
So you mean to say that I have to run a 400% load test with 2000 users. Is that what you want? Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
But this approach is wrong. You cannot directly run with 400% load. The reason is if you're running a 400% load test with 2000 users, and if it crashes or something occurs, then you cannot confirm to your client whether it is supporting 200% and 300% load. You got it?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
your client
Yes.
will ask,
Okay.
your client will immediately ask, okay, 400% load is failing. What about 300%? They will immediately ask. So always what you have to do, increase the load gradually like this. So first, then you have to run a 200% load test with 1000 users, and then a 300% load test, okay, with 1500 users. So now now the applications which we tested, some of the applications successfully passed to the 400% load test. Some of the applications failed at 400%, but okay, I mean sorry, some of the applications failed at 300% only. We didn't execute 400% also. It was failing at 300. That means the max it can support is 200 only. Some of the applications. So they have given a list of applications what we have to test, and we have tested all the applications, and we have mentioned which application supporting how much load. For example, Isha Training Solutions is the application name supporting 300% load. Next one is WebTools application supporting 400% load. Like that, we have given a list. So what did they do? The applications for the applications which are not supporting 400%, they immediately increased the hardware infrastructure like CPU, okay, memory, and all those things. That means they have increased the capacity of the application servers. Why? To support 400% load, okay, because they don't want to lose customers, especially during pandemic. Every customer would choose online, okay. They never used to go to bank, right? Now we are going to bank, but then earlier for few months or for few months we never went to bank, right? So that's the reason. So they increased hardware infrastructure, and they immediately, and then again they asked us to test, and then it was supporting 400% load test. So that's how scalability. How scalable is your application? So if your application is not supporting the load, then you have to increase, either you have to either you have to add additional servers, or increase increase existing servers capacity. So we call it as scale out and scale up. So we'll discuss this later. Not required now. We'll discuss this in our
Abhishek,
upcoming session. Yeah, tell me.
so what is the difference then for scalability and stress testing? In stress testing also we are increasing the user and testing, right?
Yeah, stress testing. You're just testing with little more number of users. There is no definite number as such. Like 100%, 200%. Okay. Like there is no specific thing. Either we will not run both the tests. Okay. Let's say there is an application. If you are running stress testing, you will not run scalability testing. Not required. You can choose any one of that and you can run. It doesn't mean that you have to run both. In fact, for every application, you will not run all of these tests. Okay. That's the important point. So there are many tests over here, right? You will not run all of these tests. You will run max 2 or 3 types of tests. Okay. Like majority of the projects, they run load, endurance, and scalability. Okay. Majority of the projects. Okay. Because load test, we are checking speed. Endurance, we are checking stability. Scalability testing, we are testing the scalability. So because performance testing is measured in these terms, by default, most of the projects will choose these 3 tests only. Okay, so some of the testing approaches might be little bit relevant, but it is not completely same. Okay, and especially when it comes to scalability, ad hoc requests might come up anytime. Okay, and this is specifically assuming future growth. This is specifically assuming future growth. Now client has to tell by how much percentage the growth will be, but in stress testing client is not going to tell you anything. The client will tell you that, hey, okay, stress the application little bit and more with more number of users and tell me how it is responding, because client wants to be on a safer side. Okay, like in worst case, if the number of users accessing the application are increasing, how it is responding, client wants to know. So for that reason we will do a stress test with little more number of users, like 600, 700, 800. Okay, if client explicitly asks you, if client explicitly is asking you to test until it breaks, that also you have to do. Okay, now that is about, see here
Okay.
client simply mentioned like, okay, like due to pandemic it can grow up to this, that's why we have done till here, otherwise we wouldn't have done. Okay, so that is scalability. Then what about the next one? Okay, we will discuss volume test. We will discuss this failover testing later in sense after next session. The reason why we have to discuss this after next session is, if you want to understand how failover testing is done, first you have to understand what is server, what is app server, application server, what is a web server, what is a database server. Without understanding those terms, you cannot discuss anything about failover testing. Okay, so we will discuss this failover testing in our upcoming session where we discuss about servers. Now volume test, coming back to volume test, this is similar to load test only, except that huge data will be inserted into database. Hope everyone knows what is database at least, which is used to store data, application related data, like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, like this. Okay, so this is similar to load test, except that huge data will be inserted to database. Okay, that's it. Now when I say this is similar to load test, that means we are going to run as it is. Whatever we are going to run, same thing we are going to run here also. Nothing change. Then why are we calling it as volume test? When I'm saying everything is same, all the points are same. We'll run for 1 hour. Users will be same. We will verify response times. Okay, server issues will verify. Okay, then why do we run this volume test? This is not the test that we run frequently. We will run very rarely. That too when there is a specific requirement. But how different is this to a load test? The only difference is the amount of data, okay, we have to insert into database should be huge. Before running a load test or before running this test, the amount of data that is there in the database should be huge. For example, now you run a load test. When you run a load test in database, you have 1 lakh records. You have 1 lakh records. Now client is thinking that maybe in future, not in future, I mean in sense, when real users start using the application, maybe after few days or months or years, the number of records might increase to up to 3 lakh records. That means what you have to do now is insert these 3 lakh dummy records into database now itself with the help of DBA. Okay, with the help of DBA or developers, whatever it is. So DBA means database administrator. Okay, like Oracle database DBA, SQL DBA, like that. So now only you insert 3 lakh records into database and then run the load test. Then what do you identify? When the number of records are huge in the database, how the application is responding, how the SQL queries which are running in the backend, how they are performing. Are there any long running queries? So those things you have to identify. So mostly focus will be mostly on SQL queries performance. Why? Because we are increasing the data. So I hope you know what is SQL query. I mean, you might have seen something like this: select star from employee, some kind of SQL query you might have seen in your college days or in your IT career. You might have seen some sort of query like this. So when these sort of queries run in the backend for every application. So when these sort of queries run, so if the number of records are very less, it will get data quickly. It will fetch the data quickly. But when the number of records are more, it will take little bit more time, right? So how much time additionally it is taking? Is it really slow when the number of records are more in the database? That is what you have to identify. Your focus should be mostly on the SQL queries performance. Understood? Everyone understood? If you're not understanding, if you understood at least 60%, I'm very happy now, because this is just the first session where I'm trying to explain you different types of performance testing. Okay, so no worries. We will discuss again and again these concepts in our upcoming sessions, but I want you to get some idea about the different types of performance testing we have. Okay, so this particular type of testing is done when you have huge amount of data in the database. Normally in a load test, we don't insert huge amount of data. Whatever data you have it, you have it, that's it. But intentionally we will insert data into database before running this volume test. And then we will focus mostly on SQL queries performance, how these SQL queries are running in the backend. Okay, any questions? Are there any database related issues? Okay, those sort of things we will identify. Any questions still here? Did you understand volume test? And one more thing, this is not the type of test that we run frequently, guys. Okay, now the next simple test is spike testing. Spike testing. So this spike testing, generally again we do it only on demand. This type of testing is like we do this type of testing to see how the application is responding when there is a sudden increase and there is sudden decrease in the number of users. Have you ever seen ECG? Normally we seen normally when we go and test, go for a cardiac test, right? They do some ECG. You would have seen the graph up and down like this, right? So here this means when the number, this is the increase in load, this is decrease in load, increase in load, decrease in load. When you intentionally increase the load and decrease the load in very short span of time, okay, like sudden increase then sudden decrease, then how the application is responding? Is it crashing? Is it responding well? How it is behaving? For that reason we do spike testing. Okay, sudden increase or decrease in load. Okay, spike testing is all
Ashik,
about.
how can we
Yes, tell me.
increase and decrease?
Sorry,
How can we increase and decrease suddenly like
in the
that?
controller. In the controller, when we configure the scenario, right? When we create this type of scenario, we can increase and decrease the load.
Okay, I mean we
Okay.
can change the user.
Yeah, you can change the user.
We
Yes,
can
you can
change
do
the.
that. Yes, you can change. You
Okay.
can add users also. Yes, you can add users. But generally, what happens? If you want, you can predefine them. For example, you want to start with 50, suddenly 50, and then bring them down, add 100 again immediately, and then bring them down. Like that, you can predefine also. You can add them, or you can do a predefined configuration. Okay, anything is fine. But what exactly you want to do
Okay.
is a sudden increase or a sudden decrease in the load. Okay, and then how the application is behaving. So now you might ask, should we do all of this? Really, no. we 99% of the projects we do load, endurance, and scalability only. We never touch other types of testing. Only if they ask you to do, then only you have to touch other types of testing. If the client is not aware of performance testing at all, now you might ask, okay, client is suggesting something. Now, what if client doesn't know anything about performance testing? What should you do? What type of test you want to suggest? Always suggest load, endurance, and scalability. Always suggest load, endurance, and scalability. Okay, because performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. These three are related to that. So if you want your application to behave properly or to be fast and and also responding well, then these three tests should be important for you. Okay. Now, some of the projects will do stress testing instead of scalability. That's fine. I mean, there is no hard rule that you have to use this, that, and all. It's all up to the project. Whatever client says, you do. If client is not saying anything, you along with your manager decide what to do and do. That's it. Nobody is going to tell you why did you do endurance testing, why did you do volume testing. Nobody is going to ask you. Okay. So these are the different types of testing. Now, the only thing pending is failover testing, which we will discuss in our upcoming session after understanding what is a server, what is application server, and all those things. So basically, I'll tell you a couple of lines about it. So failover testing is basically I mean, for a backup purpose, they will have multiple servers. Like let's say this is server 1, server 2 for backup purpose. Like if something goes wrong, there should be some backup, right? So they will have multiple server instances like this. Now, when you do failover testing, what you have to do is you have to intentionally bring one of the server down and then see how this is performing. Okay, and run for some amount of time and then see consistently how this is performing, how the response times are coming. And then after some time, you again bring this up back to normal. And then you see how both are performing. Like that, you have to do failover testing, and you have to involve something called load balancer. You have to involve development team. So I'll tell you the approach, what you have to do in our failover testing. I mean, in our upcoming session, I'll explain you clearly with the diagram. What is failover testing? Very, very important nowadays. In interviews also, they will ask you what is failover testing. Okay, most popular in recent days. Okay, now I'm gonna save this document and I'm gonna send it to you. Okay, types of, okay. So any questions? Whoever is attending only today, please go through yesterday's demo session. It was, I mean, I personally took feedback from some of the participants. Okay, I directly called them. I'm not sure. I know some of you have got the call from me. I'm pretty much I mean, satisfied with the response. Okay. So I request whoever is attending only today, I request you to go through the yesterday's demo session first, and then again come back to this and go through this once quickly. Okay, you can set the speed to 1.5 and go through it quickly so that you'll understand better. And in our upcoming sessions, we are going to discuss all the topics, okay, which are actually mentioned in the course content directly. So NFR, okay, like servers, what is server, app server, and all, then failover testing, then non-functional requirements, workload modeling, okay, all those things. So any questions for today? So actually, a couple of you guys pinged me asking for installation, trial version installation. Don't worry, they will get back to, they will touch base with you soon. The admin team will touch base with you soon, and they'll get it done.
Yeah. When the failover testing will be done, could you just repeat it to us? I just missed it. Is it the when application server or database server is not working, or it got when the service server
See,
is got failed?
basically, there will be multiple server instances for application server. Okay, I mean, I'm not saying a web server will not have multiple instances, but most of the projects, application server instances will be multiple. Okay, I mean, I'm just answering to you only. Others you can ignore because we haven't discussed what is application server and all about. I'm just answering the question for today. Okay, don't take it. Take this answer for you. So application server instances will be multiple in most of the cases. The reason is depending on the amount of load the application is expecting, the project architect will decide how many application instances they need, and they will configure it accordingly. Now, definitely they will have more than one node or one instance, because if the load increased and if there is only one server instance and if that is crashed, then the entire application will go for a toss and it might result in a business loss directly. So instead of that, they configure multiple server instances, and from our perspective, what we have to make sure is, if any one of the server instance is down for some XYZ reason, then how the other server is performing. Is other server able to handle the complete load? Okay, but in the meantime, they will make sure that the server which is down, they will bring it back to normal. So in that meantime, whether other servers are able to handle the load or not is what we have to verify. And again, once the server which is down, once it is up and running, then how the load is being distributed. Okay, there the load distribution is also important aspect. So load should be equally distributed. How it will be equally distributed? Again, there is something called load balancer algorithms. So project architect will decide what the algorithm they have to use for load distribution. Okay, so we
Yes.
will discuss in detail in the upcoming session.
Yes, good answer. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, so any other questions for today?